This video is only one part of an in-depth review, so check out the rest at thegoodride.com. Thanks for watching. Welcome to The Good Ride. I'm James Beastie. While I'm married with children, I'm deeply committed to an open relationship with snowboard gear. And here's an example of that. This is a review of the Salomon Dancehaul, and I was late to the game in getting this review up, but I lost all my contacts at Salomon. There was a reorg, and I finally found a new contact. But in the meantime, I just bought this board in the hopes that it might be a favorite. And spoiler alert, it is. It is a very recommendable board, especially at this price point, and it works well against the boards I compared it to, which is what I'm talking about next, the Orca 150, the Gremlin 152, and my good old hybrid 153 in the corner there. One thing, this is the 2022, but it doesn't seem like it's changing for 2023, so this review still stands. I tried this primarily with Union Atlas and Burton Kendos, but I did get on the 32 TM3 XD and some other boots as well. And I got this in a wide variety of conditions. I took almost a full season with this, and although I didn't get a ton of days, I waited for different conditions in each situation. For example, I got it in some pretty firm but pretty fun groomers over at Mammoth. Then when I got home at Mount Bachelor, I rode some good groomers, but I primarily after that got it in varied powder conditions, but pretty good powder. And to give you a short summary, this hangs in there with the best of the best when it comes to that alternative free ride. A little shorter, a little wider, but it still has a very versatile, do anything kind of feel. It's very soft, it's very playful, it's very buttery, but yet still very poppy and energetic. It just has a very fun, dynamic, easy flex that can do a lot of things despite its tapered directional shape. It feels centered on board when you set it up on reference, but not too centered. It still has a little bit of that tapered directional feel, and it really compared well and stood out on its own in a lot of places against all these other favorites that I have here. It could carve almost as well as the Gremlin as long as you weren't too aggressive because it's not as stiff. It had that do anything versatility of the hybrid that I love. And it could get almost as setback and surfy as the Orca. And I've just really liked its overall personality in all conditions that I rode. So let's talk sizing. The 152 felt a little bit too soft for my weight at 190 when I was riding this, but it was doable and I liked it. I loved the way my boots worked with this width and this length. They worked really well, and that was a perfect match. Going up to a 157 might be too much for me. It'll be better for my weight, but I might have more trouble managing this board with my size 9 boots. So I'm keeping this 152. It's my buddy. I'm fine being a little heavy for it. So when it comes to shape, this is tapered and directional, and it does need a little bit more back foot weight, but not as much as you would think, and it's not something that's gonna fight you if you throw it around switch. It's gonna feel okay. It does okay if you ride center weighted, but you definitely have to adapt to this and ride a little bit more back foot weighted. It's not as surfy off the tail as the Orca, and it's kind of there with the hybrid and a little more so than the Gremlin, which feels a little more centered, but all of these boards are more back foot weighted, but it definitely has its own personality, and it kind of sits in between the hybrid and the Gremlin. When it comes to camber profile, there's a good bit of camber here, but a decent amount of early rise going into a long nose, and it feels semi-locked in though. It feels a little more cambery than the hybrid, a little less than the Gremlin, which is pretty much full camber, And it just feels like a different world compared to the hybrid rocker Orca, which has that kind of loose auto spinny feel. But the Orca is by far the most forgiving. The hybrid is probably second when it comes to forgiveness, then the Dancehaul, and then distant fourth the Gremlin. That's just full camber, technical, poppy, carvy, drivey, unforgiving kind of thing. But I found it was okay to skid my turns, and I just feel like this board has a great personality in terms of one footing, flat basing, and just feeling the same in all conditions that you ride. Now let's talk flex here, and you have a very medium flex. Now in the tip and tail, the nose is medium, almost medium soft. The tail is much stiffer than the nose, but if you look in the middle here, let's do this off the tail here. If you look in the middle here, it is definitely medium stiff. You look at the Orca, you've got a stiffer flex, but this butters and plays around on snow a lot easier than it looks. The Gremlin is medium stiff too, but feels the most stiff on snow. My good old hybrid, a board that does so many things well. I just love this board. This just feels medium throughout, a little more medium stiff, but less than almost every other board except for the Dancehaul. It's very easy to butter, and it's got very good energetic pop that just made me a better snowboarder. I could just pop this no problem. And I loved that balance that it has between being poppy and energetic, but also being buttery and also being good in all conditions you want to ride. It never got too cranky in uneven snow. It bucked and bounced you around, but it didn't feel like it was sending chatter up into your joints like I feared it might. And I just love this flex personality. I hope Salomon does more things with that. And you can see that with the high path. Now, when it comes to speed, I'm not gonna really get into the tech of the base. I don't even know what it is, and I don't care. I just know that when I had it on snow and I waxed it, it had very good base glide. It wasn't amazing, but it was almost there with the hybrid, and I felt like it was the same or better than the Orca, and definitely better than the Gnu Gremlin, which has the least base glide out of all these. That's just the kind of the one drawback of that board. Just no matter how well you wax it, whatever you do, it just doesn't keep up with the rest of these. None of these are exceptional. None of these have that kind of like hovercraft base glide, that Jones base glide or Gentim stick base glide. But this isn't really at the price point where I would expect that, so I was pleasantly surprised. But overall, it's not for bombing. If you like to bomb, you probably don't want any of these boards. Now, when it comes to edge hold, the three to the left of the Dancehaul are much better in terms of grip. All three of these grip exceptionally well and are excellent hard snow specialists and do really well in ice. This wasn't as grippy as those, but it hung in there and did really well in those surprise kind of, or like surprise snow mint patches that I found here and there. It didn't just completely slide out. If you dial back your turns a little bit or really know how to twist and get that edge engaged in harder snow, this will do fine. And it doesn't grab as much as the other boards in softer, wetter snow. So totally up to you there. Now, when it comes to turn initiation, this has a pretty wide width, not a super amount of taper in the tail. So I was expecting it to be a little slow, but like all these kind of like somewhat shorter, somewhat wider boards, they do a little better than you would think for their width when it comes to turn initiation, and it was pretty easy to turn. But when I got this on edge, and I wasn't like going too fast or trying to really do a gnarly carve, this really turned well. It had excellent spring out of the turn, and it was a really pleasant turning experience. It really likes that circle carve. It really likes that across the groomer carve, like all these boards do. They're all kind of more carvy. But I think this and the hybrid were a little more balanced, and they just kind of liked all kinds of turns a little bit more than the Orca and the Gremlin. but all of them can do a little bit of everything. They all just lean a little bit more on the circle carvy side of things. Now, when it comes to powder, I wasn't sure about this because I've had some good and bad experiences with Salomon boards, but this is a very good floater for what it is. And when you set it all the way back, you get pretty good directional float. You have that big nose, you have that smaller tail, you have that taper in the tail. When you set it all the way back, it's 4 inches back from center of board at a 21.75 inch stance width, which is really good for me because I'm a 21.5 inch stance width kind of guy these days. I can slide it all the way back and get really good directional float. And when I took this out on the mountain, I was impressed with it. The Orca's a little better. It's right there with the hybrid, even though the hybrid isn't as far back on board. It's just doing something to make it float pretty well. And it's way better than the Gremlin. The Gremlin's kind of the slouch here in the powder section. It makes up for it though in the carving section. When it comes to riding switch, it was pretty doable. It was probably my favorite out of all these boards here. I would say the hybrid is second, and then the Gremlin, and then the Orca. But all of them are doable switch, but this was my favorite for sure. The Dancehaul just did the best there. And if you want to go into the park and jib, this has a flex that's soft enough to do it. I didn't, but I wouldn't balk. If my friends wanted to go that way and I wanted to hit a jib or two, I could do it on this. I would love riding pipe with this. I think it just turns really well. And hitting small to medium-sized kickers for me and my weight on this 52 is very doable. However, at my older, more broken stage in life, I'm still having a blast, but I'm just happier going off small hits, and this did a great job. I think it tracks into jumps really well. All these boards do that really well. It's got a mountain freestyle flex and personality in a tapered directional kind of free ride shape, and it makes it a very diverse one board quiver. So overall, I'm so glad I spent my hard-earned Good Ride dollars to get this guy. I'm glad it's not changing much or at all for 2023. So this review stands, and I'm really glad I got to take the time and do this review properly and get this in all conditions and compare it against many of my favorites, because it just shows what a great board they made and how recommendable it is, especially at this price point. So there you have it. All our reviews are a best effort, objective opinion from an average rider's perspective. There's no brand oversight, and we're free to say whatever we want. We send back everything unless it's a favorite, then we ask to keep those or straight up buy them. Now, if you need advice, fill out the Me Harmony profile in the Contact Us section of the site. It's the only way I can help you properly. If you want to support us, and if what we reviewed appeals to you, it helps if you buy through our links. So, thanks for watching.